Okay, so pleasant good night to everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to the Real World Engineering series. This is now a series that's truly been beneficial to many people, I believe. We've had many guests on the series thus far, and tonight we're going to be looking at female engineers who are going to give us some tips on communication skills that a lot of the time when we go to school, we learn a lot of the theory and we are not taught how to actually communicate when we actually leave school. So I'm really thankful that we have both persons here tonight, Janelle Chandler and Carla Austin. But just before they come on and introduce themselves and give us some insight, we just want to highlight a few things here tonight. We're just going to share our slides shortly. So as you could appreciate, we do have this webinar here tonight. We tend to host our webinars every first Wednesday. That's what we tend to do every first Wednesday at 7 o'clock. On our next slide, this is going to be where all of the meat of the matter tends to happen. So we've had varying types of webinars over our series. And for this one, what we want to remind you is that if you have any questions at all, questions are always welcome. Feel free to just use the raise hand icon, or you can type it in the chat. So when you do the raise hand icon, what it means is that you're going to come on. You can either just use your mic alone because you may be shy, or you can turn on your video and turn on your mic and you can ask that question directly to our speakers tonight. And if you're extremely shy and you don't want to turn on your mic or turn on your camera, you can always feel free to just type your question in the chat and I'll be sure to get that question answered for you. On our next slide. This is our contact information for the Barbados Association of Professional Engineers. We are located just by Barbados Light and Power. We have a spanking new website, baitbp.com. So feel free to go and check that out. You can choose to register, become a member of the organization. You can look around on the website and see what information we have, whether it be past events, any forms. We do have our dinner coming up very shortly in October. Plans are already underway, and that is our annual award dinner ceremony. So feel free to take a look out for that information. If you also have any questions, you can reach out directly to our secretary at engineers@cabsurf.com or by phone call to 429-6105. And of course, we do have our social media, which right now you can see that we have our Zoom here, but we're also streaming it on YouTube as well. Next slide. So we have two, well, one is a scholarship and one is a grant. So Barbados Association of Professional Engineers, also known as BATE, is the person who's going to be facilitating the Angus Etchell Engineering Scholarship. Now, this is definitely an opportunity that if you are currently in engineering, whether it be in St. Augustine, whether it be at Mona, Canada, America, UK, anywhere, if it is a case where you are currently in school or you're about to start, as this August, September term is coming up, please remember to go ahead and register for this scholarship. The deadline is the 30th of June. We're already receiving applications, so go ahead and get yours in if you know that this money will definitely be of assistance to you. We also do have the Arrow and Need to Borrow Educational Trust. This is going to be up to $10,000. You can see here from the website, Arrow and Need to Borrow Education Trust.org. Go ahead and check out that website, get all of the information that you need. If this is something that you definitely want to use towards for you, we see here we have our age 22 to 45, a bit more of the postgraduate studies, while the Angus Etchell is more for the undergraduate studies. So we're now spanning both areas here. So definitely make sure you get your applications in. That deadline is June 28th. So they're both in June. Make sure that you're getting your applications started as quickly as you can. Next slide. Now, It worked so lovely. And again, we're so thankful. On the 23rd of June, we're going to have the International Women in Engineering Day. Now, this, of course, means that we're going to try our best to highlight women in engineering. We do have some persons in engineering here tonight, both women in engineering, any of the sort. And we're thankful that you're able to make it. And of course, we're going to be doing some activities to see what we can. If you as a person have any female engineering that you think you want to highlight, feel free to send out a message to us so we can know, but we'll be sending out some correspondence for that shortly. Another thing to note to bring up is that in July, we are going to be looking to host another line. It's going to be more of a quiz night this toss versus last year where it would have been a line in December. So just look out, whether it be via email, whether it be via our social media, anything at all, or you can reach out to the secretariat, reach out to anybody you might know who's here tonight. Feel free to reach out. Do we have any more slides? Just making sure before we move on to, okay, great. And then we also have the membership fees. If you are currently in school, the student membership fees are stated here at $20. Graduate, those persons who have graduated, but they're not just yet registered, they will be $150. Affiliate members are persons who are anyone associated, but they may not have the exact degree. So let's say your degree is not accredited, you can still join the association and we're definitely going to welcome you. And corporate members tend to be persons who would have had their registration process already completed. So we're thankful for all of you here in attendance. So let's begin our webinar. Let's talk about why are we choosing tonight to actually look at communication. Now, I remember when I was going to school, that persons were always of the belief that, engineers can't talk. They're always so shy. They don't know what to say. And then we're going to have that perception. When you then leave and you go into the workforce, we now have to change the way that we're doing things. We can't just speak all of the engineering. We just can't say everything nice and technical. And what that then in turn brings is a type of intimidation that we might feel, whether it be at meetings, whether it be on site, where, as we could appreciate in Barbados, when you come in as an engineer, you're now coming in a supervisory position, but you're supervisor over people who have been in this field for years and years, experience that we can't even begin to blink and think about. And we now have to supervise them. So we get that intimidation. We also feel a fear that there are a lot of times where we don't know because we're kind of figuring out things. We're trying to change that book smart into actual experience, and we don't know how to ask questions. We don't know how to approach people. We don't want to come off too aggressive. We don't want to come off too quiet, and then when you look around and you see how people are around you, you want to feel a sense of competence. But we want to make sure that we're looking to build. We want to make sure that we know how to communicate, not only with our peers who might be working with us. We want to be able to communicate with people on site. We want to be able to communicate with people that we're supervising. We want to be able to communicate with clients because, as we can appreciate, engineers don't just stay as graduates. We're going to get years of experience. We're going to go into more of a management role. And now we have to actually speak to clients. We have to speak to persons who are now leaving, and we are now in charge of them. And of course, we have to speak to our bosses. So we have here tonight two persons who I think are going to do fantastic at this. I think are going to give us a wealth of information as they have years of experience in engineering, whether it be at different levels or not, it does not matter. Engineering is something that you have to hit the ground running from day one, and communication is going to be beneficial to all of us. So, Janelle, Carla, whenever you're ready.
Hi, good night, everyone. Thanks, Ria, for that lovely introduction. So as you would have mentioned, tonight both myself and Carla will be speaking to you on this topic. So this is just a quick outline or overview of the discussion that we will have today. Um, just to give you guys some time to see what we'll be talking about. We're going to talk about communication skills that we need but aren't taught, asking questions strategically, workplace professionalism and soft skills, managing communication across multiple stakeholders, communicating technical concepts, building trust, credibility, and visibility, handling mistakes and feedback professionally, navigating difficult conversations, leadership, mentorship, and team communication, as well as developing confidence while still learning, using AI as a communication co-pilot, and lessons we wish we learned earlier.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So it is my great pleasure. I'm Carla Austin. It is my pleasure to introduce Miss Janelle Chandler. Janelle is a strategic infrastructure and operations professional with over 15 years of experience across engineering, facilities management, real estate, project delivery, and business transformation in the Caribbean and the UK. She is a civil engineer by training, and she holds a first-class BSc in civil engineering and an MSc in facilities management with distinction. And Janelle is also a chartered member of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Throughout her career, she has led multidisciplinary teams, managed complex infrastructure and operational portfolios, and driven transformational initiatives within highly regulated environments. Janelle's experience spans construction, commercial property management, facilities management, as well as digital transformation projects. Passionate about helping young professionals grow, Janelle is a strong advocate for the communication, relationship building, and leadership skills that complement technical expertise and help engineers thrive in the workplace. So today, Janelle joins us to share practical insights on the communication skills that engineers need, but we are rarely taught in the classroom.
Thanks for that, Carla. And I will be introducing Carla to you guys tonight. Carla brings over 15 years of experience in energy, infrastructure, and project management with a proven track record in leading multidisciplinary teams, optimizing systems reliability, and delivering complex capital projects. She holds a Master's of Science in Energy with distinction from Heriot-Watt University and a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Nottingham. Her professional credentials include Chartered Engineer with the Engineering Council in the UK. She's a member of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers and a project management professional, along with being a certified maintenance and reliability professional. I just want to add, Carla and I have known one another for 10 years. I actually looked back to see when we would have first formally connected. Carla sent me a message on LinkedIn, September 13th, 2016, inviting me to attend a conference. And I definitely accepted that invitation. So our professional relationship has grown and continued over the years, and we both support one another as women in the field of engineering and facilities management and infrastructure over the years. So over to you, Carla.
Okay, if we can have the
You are only as good as you can
next slide.
communicate. So as you improve your communication skills, you start to shine your light more brightly in the world. Whereas a lot of my students tend to think, oh, but it's my boss's responsibility to see the brilliance in me. No, it's not. It's your responsibility to shine brightly.
Yeah.
So when you take it upon yourself, things change. You are only as good as you can communicate.
Okay,
So Carla,
so how Janelle and I have structured this presentation is that it's going to be a chat more so between us than us lecturing to you, the audience. So we are going to be asking ourselves a series of questions, and there will also be opportunities as well for the audience perhaps to pose some questions to us. So I believe that Janelle then is ready with the first question.
yes. So Carla, what was the biggest communication lesson that you ended up learning on the job rather than in the classroom?
So definitely it was learning that being technically correct is not enough. So much emphasis for us as engineers is placed, particularly when we're at university, it's about getting to the right answer. We want to get to the perfect solution. And sometimes when we're faced with a problem and we believe that we have the answer, it can look very simple and straightforward to us. But if we are not able to communicate that effectively, now that we're in the workforce, then it doesn't matter that we may have found the most brilliant solution ever. If we can't get it implemented, if we can't get buy-in from either our peers or from our superiors. So simply put, if we can't get persons to understand our message and support our recommendation and trust our analysis and our reasoning, then we may not actually achieve anything at all. So this is how we can use effective communication to create understanding and not simply just transfer technical information. So in this regard, then, Janelle, when you think back to university, what communication skill do you wish someone had taught you before you entered the workplace?
For me, it is paying attention to your tone when speaking to persons. That is something that I don't want to say hit me like a ton of bricks when I went into the world of work, but the way in which you deliver the message, the way in which it sounds to the persons that you're speaking to could make a huge difference in terms of how it's received. And you want to ensure that that communication loop and the feedback loop is there. So I would say for me, that was one of the main things. I don't really want to use engineers, but we could tend to be very matter of fact in how we communicate and present information or speak to persons, whereby that is just inherent in our nature because we're technical people. But when you are in the world of work, you are dealing with persons who are both technical and non-technical, and you tend to find that a lot of the non-technical persons, you know, may like things delivered in a different way. And that's one of the things that I had to learn and I am still adapting to in my career.
Agreed. Definitely echo those sentiments there. I too am still learning that to this day.
So as you improve your communication,
Remember, affirmations don't build confidence. Likes and views don't build confidence. Being told you're great doesn't build confidence. Watching motivational videos doesn't build confidence. There are only 3 things that build confidence. Choosing discomfort builds confidence. Keeping promises to yourself builds confidence. And building competence builds confidence.
So Janelle, this is something that I see a lot on the topic of answering questions, particularly when I have interns or young graduate engineers. It really does center about speaking up and asking a question in meetings. Did you ever hesitate to ask questions early in your career because you were worried about how others would perceive you?
Thinking about it and reflecting back some time ago, um, some meetings, it depended on what it was. So more so the ones where I would have been in a room full of persons in my mind that had a wealth of knowledge or persons who were more senior to me, I may have been a little hesitant. But in terms of my inherent nature and wanting to understand, um, I eventually got out of that shell and would ask questions, more from a point of to get clarity. And it was interesting whereby sometimes when they answer some questions and to me it's like, okay, just asking this or that. I know as a younger person or the new person in the room. And then the discussion that came out of it afterwards, because some of the persons realized, okay, well, maybe this was not clear, or maybe we haven't communicated this properly, that we're getting this question. Um, change the dynamic in the space. So yes, initially, I definitely was, a bit hesitant. Um, but where I really needed that clarity, I opted to speak up for sure.
Okay, and definitely, I think I really want to echo your statements here on questions, and I'll kind of back that up with a little story of my own. It's actually how I made friends at university. So this is like you get your very first big assignment. The lecturer has put it up, he's given it out, and there's a room of auditorium of what 250 people, and we're all first years, and it's deer trapped in headlights look on everyone's face. And I raised my hand and I asked a question. And as a first year to ask a question like that to the lecturer, his response was very a little rough, I'd say, very, very sharp. With perhaps the expectation that I should already have this particular answer to this question. But coming out of the lecture hall, I was approached by a couple of my other um students and colleagues, and they were like, thank you so much for asking that question, because they didn't understand either, and they too wanted to get clarification, but it was just that, they didn't have that confidence to ask, because very often sometimes we are more afraid of the reaction that we will get when we ask the question from the persons. We may think that they may they may have some reflection on our intelligence or our comprehension and so on, but really and truly for the work that we do, it is very important for us to seek clarification, because in some instances we can't actually afford to make assumptions.
So Carla, um, continuing on from there, based on your experience, I would like you to compare when you would have initially started your career to what you do now. So as a young graduate, when you were preparing for meetings and stuff like that, how would you actually prepare yourself before asking questions in high stake conversations? Then how do you prepare yourself now? And what has caused that shift for you?
Well, as a young graduate, I think we would have tended to over prepare. So this is where, at least before a meeting, you have to familiarize yourself. If there's been reading materials, you may want to start to sketch out the framework of your question. You may want to start to have a few jotted down and ready, if there's something perhaps that you may not understand, or if there's something on the drawing or in the scope or the schematics that you are genuinely curious about, and it hasn't, raised itself throughout the topic of the conversation. Now, with experience and moving into leadership roles, my questions now, and this was even actually as in project management, my questions now are driven to ensure that others are fully briefed and aware, and have considered either the risks or the options. So when I'm asking questions, it is from the perspective of making sure that we have covered all of our bases. So, while the question may seem like a simplistic one, it gives me that peace of mind and that reassurance that yes, we have considered X and we've considered Y, and my team has had, the time to be able to do that. Or perhaps maybe we are catching something that may have slipped through the cracks. So that's really how my questioning style has changed over the years.
I just want to echo something that you mentioned there in terms of asking simple questions, especially now further on in the career. I find that complex problems are solved by simple questions. Um, so taking me back to manufacturing, there is a methodology for problem solving called 5 whys. Um, why, and then you ask why that response, and you continue, you go down the line. So keeping it simple tends to help there for me in relation to preparing for high stake conversations as well. Shall we move on to the
Fantastic. Yes, I think we
next
can
one?
move on to the next one.
All right. So Carla, in terms of should we pause and ask the chat a question, or should we continue? Because I'm curious to know from them what prevents them from asking questions when they're unsure about something.
Well, Janelle, if the topic is asking questions and we wish to get an answer, I actually do believe that yes, we could take a question from the group. So yes, does anyone,
Rhea, are there any questions?
any of our attendees, do any of our attendees struggle with asking questions in the work environment?
Actually, we're going to give them some time to respond. So if you could just repeat your question one more time for me, and I'll give
What
them some time
prevents
to
you
respond.
from asking questions when you're unsure about something? All right. Everybody seem a bit quiet at this point. Okay, we have
I
something in the
repeated the
chat.
question for them. I repeated the
Okay.
question for them. But
Okay.
what I'll do, I always like to start the ball rolling, I like to start the ball rolling. So what prevents me from asking questions when I'm not sure? I think what I've noticed is that it depends really on so many different factors. So I find sometimes it could be the person that I have to ask the question. So there are times when I don't know, and I know that I don't know. But if I'm speaking to someone that, based on their demeanor, based on how I've seen them actually respond to me and speak to me, I feel a lot more at ease to ask them a question. But if I'm speaking to a senior or someone else who I notice that they might be a little bit more upset if I have to ask them a question, or how they might respond by a little bit more aggressive. And I'm not interested in perhaps experiencing that aggression because I'm only asking because I don't know and I just want the answer. But if I know that you might be a little bit more aggressive, then I might feel a bit unsure in terms of actually willing to ask that question. And I might never ask the question. I might never. So I think that's one factor for me.
Okay. I have 2 comments on that.
Okay.
One in relation to you never know what the outcome could be. And then in not answering that question, you may always be wondering what if. And the second comment is in relation to, at the end of the day, no matter the circumstance, no matter the situation, no matter the person, the only person you have control, the only thing, sorry, you have control over is yourself. And you have zero control over how somebody might respond to you in any situation, even in a case where you might think, oh, this person is nice, nice and easygoing and that kind of thing. And you might just catch them on a bad day. You do not even know that. And you answer a question and you get, a messed up response. And that would still take you by storm as well. But The only thing you have control over is how you respond to that. So just always bear that in mind and be ready for getting a response that may not align to what you would like to get. So that's my comment there.
So thanks, Janelle. And
I
we did
appreciate
get
that.
some comments as well in the chat. Again, echoing Ria's statements, definitely the reaction of those who are senior. And then from Dwayne, stepping on other people's toes, especially when the question spots a light on them in high pressure situations. And what I can add there, particularly to Dwayne's comment, is we've talked a lot about, asking questions, but in responding to questions, we also have to consider how other persons may ask questions of us. And I'll just share, particularly for me, where I may find challenging. So there are instances where someone may stack all of their questions and they will pose three questions in succession. And by that time, by the time we've got through their third question, I've already forgotten what the first question was about if I've not been able to make a note, particularly if it is a complex or a multi-part question. So in those types of scenarios where you may now need to actually give a response to a question, or you may want to be able to ensure that you are posing a question to someone to get an effective response, you may need to consider your approach. So in the cases where persons may want to stack questions, sometimes, in meetings, I may state, well, can we hold all of the questions to the end? Or perhaps say, well, I will answer this portion of the question now, but for the other section of the question, can I respond to you via email and so on and so forth, just to help give myself that bit of breathing room when it comes to answering questions. So just to let the group know that not only is it being able to ask a question, but also how we are able to give ourselves room to answer the questions that are posed of us. And Oliver says, sometimes you ask a question just to stimulate discussion. And again, yes, this is valid. And with these points, it definitely, will come down to how the question is posed. And sometimes it may even be good just to prefer that, this question may be for discussion purposes. I'm not always a fan of the term where persons may say, well, they're playing devil's advocate, but definitely context really does help a lot around questioning and person's question style as well.
And just before we move on, I just want to confirm, I know that you did type in the chat, Oliver, but your hand is raised. Is it a case where you also wanted to come up and say something as well? Just wanted to be
No,
sure.
sorry. Yeah, I had my hand up for a little while, but then I decided to type it. So question
No,
has been
that's fine.
typed. Yeah,
Okay, no problem. So just to highlight as well, because I always try to make sure wherever I can, I try to get to everyone. If it is a case where, let's say persons have typed in the chat, I try to answer in order where I can. And if you do have your hand up, we actually will try our best to get to you. So you don't have to feel like we're gonna bypass you or anything like that. We're always going to try our best to get to you. So I thank you so much for that, Oliver.
you're welcome.
I didn't see
Okay.
any other responses come through, so we're going to head back over to the speakers now.
Okay. So Janelle, on the topic now of professionalism, how has your definition of professionalism evolved since your first engineering role?
Carla coming at me with these tough questions. For me, I would say like what we see here on the slide. Starting, I actually have a funny story, but like to me it's funny now. It wasn't necessarily funny back then. But my first role in engineering, which would have been as a graduate engineer, straight fresh out of St. Augustine, at Consultant Engineers Partnership. That's my first role. I remember turning up on the first day and they had on a full suit, three-piece suit. Well, yeah, three-piece. pants, inside shirt, and this full long sleeve jacket and everything. And I feeling smart, left home. At the time, I wouldn't have had a vehicle or anything. My mom dropped me to work, got out the car, and I pulled the door, stepped into the office, and I was like, I see. Went into my first meeting. Right, Paris would have been my supervisor at the time, went straight on site in this three-piece suit. And yeah, when I left home and I got dressed, ready for my first day on the job, I felt like I'm showing up as this professional, this graduate engineer ready to take the world by storm. But I quickly learned professionalism is more than just how you physically appear, and it's not just about, looking a particular way. Don't get me wrong. Yes, it is important to ensure that you're presentable, but also being ready or suited for what you are stepping into is also important. Um, Outside of that little story, because I laugh at it now, thinking back. Um, for me, professionalism over the years is more than a physical appearance, and it has a lot to do with how you show up in relation to integrity, being a big one for me personally, and in relation to being in a field where civil engineering, construction, evolving into like facilities management, dealing with a lot of contractors, subcontractors, etc. Another story for you. I was on a job and we were doing some repairs to a roof, and I would have sent out the tender documents, gotten quite a few proposals back from various contractors, and reviewed the proposals. And there was one contractor where then we would have awarded the contract based on the assessment criteria and what's not. I would have contacted the contractor, let them know, well, you've won the award. We would have then proceeded with the kickoff site meeting. And we were there on the roof talking, and he approaches me, well, thanks a lot for awarding the contract to them. How much do I want? And I was like, how much do I want? What are you referring to? For persons who might not be familiar with this, this is in relation to, sorry if you guys heard that, but I have a 2-year-old. She's just telling me bye. She's leaving home now. This is in relation to what you would call a kickback, where persons would be dealing with contractors and they would get a piece of the pie, for lack of a better word. Me and my ignorance, I was very confused when the contractor made that proposition. But when I asked some more questions and they understood what they were referring to, I said, no, definitely not. And for me, professionally, reputation as well is critical or important. And that was something that I, from day one, was not subscribing to. So integrity, and and I guess is ethics as well in there, to me, shifted from professionalism being a physical appearance or how you show up physically to the principles and the morals and the values that you then continue on as your career develops. So I hope I answered your tough question, Carla.
Thank you, Janelle. And now you get to return the favor.
Yes. What soft skill would you say has contributed most to your success?
Oh wow, that really is a tough one. I think for me it is the ability to listen and practice active listening. Again, when we are fresh out of university and we turn up for work, we may be filled with ideas of grandeur and delusion, where at that point in time we may think that we know absolutely everything that we have just learned from a bunch of textbooks. But as you were saying earlier, you're on site now and you were faced with managing others, or actually perhaps it was Rhea that was saying that you're managing others who've been on the job longer than you. You know, these guys have decades in, and you are a newly minted engineer of days or weeks. So listening to others when, you know, when you're in conversation, when you're discussing a particular topic, solution, troubleshooting, brainstorming, that ability to actually actively listen and not jump to conclusions or force my own opinions onto others. I found that that has been a great skill, and one of the soft skills that I use the most. I tell persons that my engineering degree that has given me the ability to discern. So I am able to listen to what others are saying. I am able to relate that back to engineering fundamentals, and then I'm able to use my technical training to make the ultimate decision then in terms of the direction that we are going to go. And I wouldn't be able to do that successfully if I am not willing to listen to others and hear other views and perspectives.
Thanks for that, Carla. Um, Looking back, what professional habits would you say helped you to build credibility early in your career?
Well, for me, for sure, it has been following through and showing up and executing. So if I say that I'm going to get back to you, then I get back to you. If I say that you're going to have this information by a certain date and time, I make every effort to do so. And then if I am not able to, and this is where communication comes in very, very handy, I will communicate that due to whatever particular circumstances, I may need a little bit more time or things haven't been forthcoming. And that level of communication and consistency, that helps to build up trust, and that ability, where persons start to trust that they can count on you and trust the fact that they will get a response, because very often sometimes we have information that we may send out an email and may go off into the ether, and you don't know if anyone has seen it. Are they going to get back to you? Are they going to return your phone call if you leave a message? So just by following through in those, what sometimes you may say are the little things, those are the areas where I've been able to build up credibility and dependability in my early career.
And I just want to add to that, in relation to us working on preparing for this discussion, where we would have had an initial chat and I said I was going to do X. I delivered on that. I pushed myself to ensure I told Carla she's going to get this by this time, and I pushed to ensure that that was done. Carla, in return, then reviewed what I would have sent to her, and she said, I'm going to get back to you with it, Janelle, by XYZ time as well. And she also delivered. So just that small interaction as well, we would have built a level of trust and reliability on, in terms of one another with regards to doing what we say we were going to do. So I just wanted to plug that in there as a little example as well. Carla, I'll let
Okay.
you lead the
Yeah.
next
So yeah, we
one.
can move on into the next slide. So one project, many voices. So how are we managing our communication across multiple stakeholders. And really, I think I'll just lead off here because you can see by the graphic, as engineers and project managers, very often we want to think and focus on our small piece of the pie or our corner of the puzzle, when really and truly there are many other roles, there are other departments that we have to interact with. We have external vendors, we may have our internal customers, we have global logistics, we have schedules to meet. So to open this conversation with Janelle, I think I'll ask, how do you approach communication when different stakeholders have competing priorities?
That is one that I continue to work on. In relation to communication with different stakeholders, I try to look at or focus on what each person is gaining from the particular task or project, what it is that they want. And then I would tailor, even though we're all working towards one particular goal, each person may have a slight variation of that goal or a specific line of interest with regards to achieving that goal. And I would adjust how I communicate with them, communicate with each person based on what their particular interest is in the project, as opposed to just talking blanket to everyone. That way I am able to get the message over to each person without muddling, for lack of a better word, the situation. And then also keeping everybody happy. Because I find sometimes when you're dealing with multiple stakeholders who have different interests, you could then tend to get one who may not be as, or doesn't feel as though their interest is top priority, making the prolonging or extending the length for the project, or making the outcome a bit more difficult to achieve because they are meddling or not cooperating as well. So I spend quite a bit of time understanding what each person, what their main objective is for the particular project. I spend quite a bit of time understanding that and then tailoring my message to each of them.
And if I can just jump on there behind Janelle, because sometimes not only we have to tailor our message, but we may then also have to tailor our method of communication. We may have Jane Doe who loves to read epistles of email and will want that really detailed report. We're going to have, the CEO that wants bullet points. We're going to have the project manager who's never going to get a chance to sit down in front of the computer. So sending them a WhatsApp message may be the fastest way, or a phone call. And for stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement, communication and the tailoring your method of communication as well. That is another tool in the toolbox to be able to effectively reach and get persons to build consensus around whatever effort it is that you're trying to push.
Okay, Carla. So just to expand on it a bit more, I have a question for you. When did you first realize that engineering projects were often more about people than technical problems?
Well, probably the first time apologies, my dog has gotten excited about something, and he's away from me, so hopefully he'll come back shortly. So the first time I stepped off the factory floor then and into, your first um, project meeting, and you're no longer faced with the equipment. And I'll tell anybody that I'll take the equipment any given day of the week sometimes over the people. And it was in that situation where now it is about the people. You have again a major project, multiple departments. You have accounts who doesn't understand the equipment. They have no idea. They've never seen it. You have legal with their own interests. You have operations with theirs. And then you have the project management or the engineering side with the technical solution. And here I am having to align everybody's priorities, manage the expectations, and and get agreement on something, by the end of this particular meeting so that we can start to move forward. And that itself can be far more difficult than actually finding the solution to the problem. So definitely, that very first project meeting in my early career was where I learned that it is really about the people. Everyone has their own interests. It's very much a what's in it for me. And you have to find the ways of connecting with each person in the room to be able to move the project forward.
So I just want to add a bit to that, going back to when I would have been studying for both my first degree and my master's degree. There would have been a course on organizational behavior, managing people. And if I'm being totally honest, those courses were the ones that I scored the lowest in because of the way, for me, the way how, talking about organizational theories and this and that, and in that, so you can see me saying this and that. I really don't remember the academic part of it. But I must say though, throughout my career, it has been more about people than technical problems. And I don't necessarily know if I would say I regret not paying more attention to those classes, but now doing research and trying to understand more about, how people think, people dynamics, what are the things in relation to influencing, being able to influence people. Um, a, a lot of that are more of what I do know is focused around that than the technical problem. The technical problem is solved, in two tools, but getting persons on board, getting persons on the same page, getting everybody to agree or sometimes to agree to disagree is where I spend more of my brain power trying to figure out how am I going to solve this people problem than the technical problem. Or in order for me to get the technical solution implemented, I need to get these people
And I
to
really
line up.
just want to say, Janelle, that yes, after that first meeting, at Portville, I was doing my master's, and yeah, the first course was organizational behavior. And trust and believe that I brought the organizational behavior textbook and put it on my desk. I was like, look. I need help. So that textbook stayed on my desk and it was referred to exactly doing Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You've got that right. Tuckman's theory, forming, storming, norming, performing. It is very relevant and must be applied. If we want to be able to engage outside of the technical realm.
So anybody that may be studying right now, as much as it may seem like this is a waste of my time at this, it's not. Pay attention. Pay attention. It will definitely come in handy down the road. And further to that, Carla, is there any particular stakeholder group you would say you find most challenging to communicate with?
Well, the C-suite, of course, the C-suites the C-suite's priorities, their expectation, their concept of time, and occasionally reality can be very challenging to
I tend
deal
to
with.
say sometimes that they seem to be in la la land, but
Some type of alternate universe, yes, where time moves in a completely different construct to what we know. So yes, dealing with the C-suite can pose its own challenges. Um,
how
I've
have you been
found
able to
Mhm.
influence them?
Again, and apologies for that. Again, it is very much on the what's in it for them. How can I sell what they want, what they're trying to achieve? How can this tie into their vision? How can this tie into their vision and try to get that early buy-in and hopefully, reduce the amount of resistance. So yes, how you word something. And actually very recently there has been the concept of negotiation. Like negotiation isn't something that we are taught. Usually I would say I leave that for the lawyers, for the legal professionals. But there were three books. It was Getting to Yes, the power of a positive no, and then there is another one. I think it's by William Ury. Um, but that theory and principle of negotiation, that is how I've been able to kind of make a bit more progress when dealing with the C-suite, to try to kind of understand what it is I want to achieve and what they may want to achieve and what they may be willing to give and how I communicate that. And yes, sometimes it means not saying no outright, as perhaps we may be prone to when we look at something like, no, that's not possible. No, we can't do that. I say, okay, now I have to say no, but instead, or or yes, but framing it in a different way to get the point across. So those little things, and again, forever remaining a student in this particular area.
Thanks for that, Carla, and thanks Ria for simplifying or breaking down that terminology for us, which is perfect context for our next slide.
We'll be asking the questions, old man. Who are you?
You.
No, not me, you.
Yes, I am you.
Just answer the damn questions. Who are you?
I have told you.
Are you deaf?
No, you is blind.
I'm not blind, you blind.
That is what I just said.
You just said what?
I did not say what. I said you.
That's what I'm asking you.
And you is answering.
Shut up! You!
Yes?
Not you, him! What's your name?
Me.
Yes, you!
I am me. He's me. And I'm you.
So Janelle, I love this slide because I think it also goes with the whole, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? And I really want to tell you that crosses my mind so many times in meetings. Like, do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? So how do we get persons to understand our technical concepts when we are speaking to largely a non-technical audience?
So for me, it has a lot to do with breaking down things in a layman as simplified as possible in layman terms. When I am explaining technical concepts, I try not to use technical language. It could initially it is a bit difficult to do because naturally, based on training, knowledge, education, and what's not, that's the only way in your mind you can frame it. But over time, I've been able to, I don't want to say necessarily master the skill, but anything that I'm trying to communicate to somebody, I try to break it down or put myself in their shoes um, to ensure that the technical concept is as simplified as possible. A way in which I do that as well is to confirm that the person understand what I would have just explained by asking them to explain it back to me in their way. And in doing that, I find it is a bit easier to talk in a simplified language because then they're the ones leading the conversation afterwards. And that tends to help for me.
That's great. And definitely I can echo those sentiments as well.
So Carla,
Mhm.
what mistakes would you say engineers commonly make when communicating technical information?
We want to show that we know. We want to demonstrate our expertise. We want to demonstrate the extent of our knowledge. And we may use some highly technical language. And I want to say that I have been spoilt in that I have generally worked or been around very technical people. So my last two recent positions were in power stations. So in a power station, you're surrounded by engineers. Everybody's an engineer. Everyone is talking technical. We are all espousing as much jargon as we are comfortable with. I'm not saying that you understand it all sometimes when you first walk into the room in the first meeting, but when you're comfortable enough, you can follow along and you're using the same language. Now I have moved into an environment where the core business is not technical. The core business is finance and economics and those are languages that's not my first language for sure. Um, so how do I translate my first language? It really does feel sometimes like I'm translating Spanish to English, you know. How do I translate my first language of engineering to this very non-technical audience? And I want to say that I have written emails or written memos and hit delete and started over from scratch because I'm like, this is good. This is fantastic. If I sent this to a colleague, they would be like, yeah, I got this. But I know that if I hit send on this, it is going to go nowhere and persons are going to come back with more questions than answers. So I have to put the audience at the forefront. This is not a time for me to show off on knowledge or experience or whatever. There are times for that. You have to know who you're catering your message to. And that's what I try to do to put the audience at the forefront and then build my messaging around to that audience. And yes, I see Malika's posted in the chat about sketching details to help non-technical persons. And any member of my team, and I can say this openly because several of them are on this call tonight, they know that I will say, take a picture, do a sketch, send an image, put it in a table, some type of visual to go along with the message. So when we are sending out our communications to the staff, we are sending an image, we are highlighting, we are drawing the boxes. And I'll go as far as to say one of my superiors, he says, use big red crayons when I'm explaining something to him. That's how he puts it. That's the level he wants me to break it down to. And I try to take it there so that the message is understood.
I have a
Yeah.
quick question before we move on as well. I'm curious, how do you find the balance between not making it seem as if you think that they're not, I don't want it like they're dumb essentially. Because sometimes when you try to break down things for people, it now can turn into the opposite where they're like, why are you talking to me like that? Do you think that I can't understand something? Are you trying to take me for a fool? So then how do you then navigate not making it so simple that they feel a certain way or feel offended, but simple enough that they understand?
Okay, so what I try to do there is first I have to acknowledge their perspective. So I'm like, yes, I appreciate the fact that you have an understanding of this particular concept. Yes, I recognize perhaps you may have even, maybe you've done some work in this subject, or you have a bit of, hobby knowledge or something like that. You have to validate that with the individual first and foremost. But it's about bringing it back to the common point, which is I want to ensure that we are clear on whatever it is before we move on. And again, just taking it from the simple point of this is essentially almost like having multiple contractors on a work site that speak different languages. And I've worked in that type of environment. And one of the most important things, say, if we were dealing with something like safety, is that we are not moving on until it is very clear that every single person on this site understands what it is we are looking to do. So is to give the person that comfort. I'm not belittling you. I'm not putting you down or anything like that. I just want to ensure that there is clarity and that there's no room for future misunderstanding or miscommunication.
Rhea, did that
Splendid.
help?
Of course. And another thing that also came to mind as you all were speaking was I've noticed as I'm interacting with persons as well, is that experienced persons tend to, as you guys say, you tend to get in the habit of being able to communicate without having to think that, oh, this is not common knowledge. So then people will start stating terms. And now when you're in a position of, let's say you've just graduated, or for example, you may not be familiar with a certain term, you now end up feeling like am I perhaps asking a stupid question? Is this like something that I was supposed to know? Because when you interact with people who've been in the field for so long, they just start to say everything and it just starts to come off the top of their head and they don't recognize that they might be using something that only they know. Now, this is not engineering specific, but I remember that I was speaking to someone who was not Barbadian and I used terminology that I was accustomed to using. So I said, making sleep stand up. Of course, I said it, the Beijing. So I was like, what that person making sleep stand up? And even though they were English speaker and they came from a different country, they were like, in their mind, they didn't want to say that they didn't understand. But then it dawned on me, wait, did you understand what I said just now? And their statement was, actually, no, I've never heard that statement before. So then it's like you have to sometimes really consider. Sometimes I'm using terminology that I've become so accustomed to that I've mastered that I actually don't even recognize that it is not something simple anymore because it's now become simple to me.
So, in relation to that example and in general, with technical persons, I find you have to put your persona one side. I don't want to say check your ego at the door, but read the room. I find technical persons do not read the room. In relation to somebody understanding what you're saying and you're talking technical language, sometimes just from their body language or their reaction, you can tell if they are totally lost. And you then stop. But technical people, I find we technical persons, I find sometimes we get so caught up in explaining this thing and going down the road because, as Carla said, we want to, for lack of a better word, show off our knowledge or, show that we know what we're talking about. You could tend to miss a lot that is happening and a lot of non-verbal communication that's going on around you. And that is something that I had to learn on the job. That's definitely something that was not taught at school. And it took some time and it took persons pulling me one side as well, occasionally to say, you need to pay more attention to persons' faces, body language and that kind of stuff when you're in meetings, when you're just having a general conversation, when you're presenting, because there's so much that you can read about how persons are receiving you or how persons are receiving your message. That can make a big difference.
Thank you.
So Janelle, I think we actually covered quite a bit from the questions in this conversation. So
Agreed. All right. So Carla, looking at building trust, credibility, and visibility, because in relation to communicating and communication skills, something that persons tend to not see or pay attention to the fact that your reputation speaks before you do, before you actually communicate what, some of that nonverbal communication I would have mentioned before, your professionalism, your overall perception that you build over time tends to precede you when you enter rooms or have discussions like this. So, early in your career, what did you think credibility was based on as a young engineer?
credibility. Actually, before I start, I think I'll just want to say reputation. I mean, reputation. If you ask me what is most precious to me, it will be my reputation. This is how I earn money. This is how I support my family. So therefore, I value this most of all, and I will do the utmost um, to protect it. And to bring that back now to the question in terms of what did I think credibility was based on, I can say that actually throughout my formative years and growing up, I think I actually had some good examples of credibility in watching my parents go about their work, how they were, dependable. And in some cases, my mother was almost the linchpin of a particular organization through, her own work ethic. So a lot perhaps of what we take into our higher education and to the workforce, a lot of that may actually start in the behaviors that we observe, growing up that are instilled in us. So how you are encouraged, perhaps to be humble and to actually, not be um too boastful, or if you want to boast, actually be able to back it up so that it's not just empty words. So it's for me, credibility was really making that link between your words and your actions. So therefore, your actions and your words must meet, and that was credibility for me, and that's how I really try to live, so that if I say I'm going to do something, you could take it as it is done, and the only way this thing is not going to be done is if I encounter, some problem that I cannot overcome, and then that's where I'll have to come and say, I cannot overcome this. And humility again plays a large role in that, because we have to also be able to humble ourselves and say, I need help. Because very often, sometimes too, when we're caught up thinking that we have to have all of the answers, or we've been given a task and we don't want to appear that we are not knowledgeable in a particular area, that those are times where it may lead to things like procrastination and delay in task completion, or the inability to complete the task, when really what we may need to do in that situation is to go with a little humility and say, well, look, you've asked me to do so and so, but I actually don't have either the knowledge, skills, or experience to be able to do this. Can you please, help me, or can you please guide me? We may not we may not be asking to be spoon-fed, but at least to be pointed in the right direction so that we can move forward to be able to execute and complete the task.
Thanks for that feedback, Carla, because you actually went into the other question that I was going to ask you in relation to balancing being visible professionally without feeling like you're self-promoting. So you definitely touched on the humility aspect of it there.
Well, if I can just come in there and say, because yes, there's humility, and sometimes I may say, I'll say we, but it may not be all of us. Some persons may be better than others. There's some persons that are very good at self-promoting that will shout it from the rooftops, whether it be big or small. And then there are others, and I will say I count myself amongst the others, where I am not so much about being recognized. My work, I am the firm belief that my work speaks for itself, that the work that I've done and the ability to see it implement and have an impact on persons' lives or be able to function or operate or be restored back into service, that is usually where I would get my satisfaction. However, and maybe it's with social media, and things like LinkedIn and so on, for career progression, visibility is very, very important. So we do still have to find that balance where, yes, we can promote our achievements and the achievements of others and recognize others and their contributions, because all of that goes towards building your confidence as well as your reputation.
And just to add to that, Carla, there are ways in which you can, for lack of a better word, self-promote without being boastful about it, and be visible professionally by being active in organizations, professional organizations such as BAPE, volunteering to do activities, to participate, and within your own organization where your manager, your direct line manager, or another area within the organization outside of your department might be doing an activity and they need volunteers or they need feedback or input from persons outside of that area, speak up, add to the conversation. And that is a way of being more visible professionally without, being boastful about credentials and that kind of stuff, by adding to the conversation there.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. We have a question for Ria in the chat. So Ria is asking us, how would you separate, being spoon-fed versus seeking clarity? So I think that's a fantastic question. And again, it is how we are asking for assistance. So you can go and ask if you've been, given a task, a problem, something that you may not quite understand. You can go and approach your boss, your superior, a mentor, and say, well, you know what, you've assigned this to me, but identify directly what it is that you're struggling with. You're not looking to get the answer. This is not like you're in school now and you're going to your friend and saying, Mala, what's the answer to question 15? You really want to understand what question 15 is actually all about. What is the concept? What is the topic? So that you can go away. So if it is fractions, instead of your friend just telling you the answer is a quarter, that you can go ahead, you can go away and actually study the concept of fractions. What are fractions all about? How do I learn fractions? What's the best way for me to understand fractions? Do I need a pie? Do I need an orange? Do I need a knife to cut it up? And that is how you get clarity to be able to then move into solving this problem yourself, versus you going and saying, apologies for the dog, that, what's this? What is it that you want me to do? And just hope the person gives you the answer. So I hope that answers your question, Ria.
Yes, please, it does.
So Carla, for someone who reputation means a whole lot and is very important, what behaviors would you say could damage credibility or reputation without people even realizing it?
Just bear with me. I'm trying to get the dog back so we don't have too much background noise. But what I'm saying, what I think there, and this is really where we always hear about first impressions, um, because very quickly a person's mind gets made up in that first negative interaction, and they will tell you that it will take X amount, and I can't remember the X amount of positive interactions that it takes to overcome one negative interaction, but there is actually, a figure that persons usually do quote in this particular situation. So there's so many cues that you may have to pay attention to. It could be things like being unreliable. It could be things like your body language. It could be, sometimes even, again, so much of it is some of it can be built up in perception, and some of it can be then um, displayed through evidence, through particular behaviors and so on and so forth. But really for me, I would say it is a lot about being reliable, and how we would say then in Barbados, overpromising and under-delivering. That is something that I think can damage a lot of people without them even realizing it. That was probably seared and baked into my brain very, very early in my one of my first roles. It wasn't even an engineering role. Being told it is better to underpromise and overdeliver than it is to overpromise and underdeliver.
Thanks for that, Carla. As you guys can see, we could talk about this topic for hours on end. So moving through, what happens when things go wrong? So handling mistakes and feedback professionally is something that is very important. And a quick question for you, Carla. Why do you think many professionals struggle to admit to mistakes?
Who wants to admit that they're wrong? Who wants to make a mistake? I think that instantly casts us all back to childhood. We get a fear. We're afraid of being punished. We're afraid of being thought that we're incompetent. We just get hit with that fear. And I want to say here right now, because Janelle, you would have mentioned that I am a certified maintenance and reliability professional. And what that means is that I am excited by failure. So when something goes wrong to me, that's where I learn the most. I start to learn how you can prevent this from happening again. So my approach then, when something goes wrong, is really that you have to own it. You have to own this mistake, because that's the first step to learning. You have to communicate early that something goes wrong. So you're going straight into your boss's or your superior's office, if you can do that, and say, well, here we have this problem, this mistake, this has happened. But when you do that, you don't come empty-handed. You have to take the problem as well as the solution. And that's really then how you can recover. From a mistake and start to build trust again, all in the same instance, versus the opposite. If we're thinking about the opposite is not owning up to your mistakes. It's trying to either cover it up or pass it off onto somebody else, throw somebody else under that bus. It's not communicating that there's a problem, and it gets worse, and persons end up in a worse situation. And if you actually said something up front, it's not coming with a solution. It's just saying, man, this here happened. I know how it happened, and I know what we're gonna do about it. That just leaves everybody, stuck and starting to feel some very negative emotions. And then certainly coming out of that, your superiors, your bosses, they're not going to be happy. They're not going to want to really give you or entrust you with much responsibility at that point in time because you have drawn down on your trust bank. So for me, certainly when things go wrong, definitely step up to the plate. I think that helps to really score more and show you in a positive light for your character than it is trying to run away from a particular problem.
Thanks for that, Carla. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you said there. So looking at navigating difficult conversations and workplace dynamics, i.e. internal politics. How have you developed, or let me rephrase that. Have you developed any strategies for approaching uncomfortable conversations? And what have those been?
So what I want to say here is that I have benefited. I have benefited from some training while I was at the Barbados Light and Power. It was in a concept called fierce conversations. And that was fantastic. It gave you that step-by-step process. And this isn't outlined here in these slides, but the fierce conversation method really opened my eyes into having difficult conversations without getting, as we would say these days, getting in your feelings, because that's what can happen. You want to have a difficult conversation, be it with your boss, be it with your friend, be it with your spouse, and very quickly you're in your feelings and the situation descends and deteriorates rapidly to the negative. Having the exposure to that, and I will advocate anybody to go and buy the book First Conversations. The lady's name is Susan something. I can't remember right now because I've actually loaned out my copy of the book. That's how much I kind of swear by it. It's always in my office and I've loaned it out. Susan Scott, thank you so much. To a colleague, but that has really helped provide a almost like a mediating method because you can actually use these steps to mediate a fierce conversation, an uncomfortable conversation between two parties and be able to come then at the end to a mutual way forward. That's what you want. And then the second point is, and I mentioned it earlier, is we have started to learn about negotiation strategy. And that's been very, very important. Again, looking at mutual interests, um, what both parties may be trying to achieve from a situation, and then trying to find that point, that happy medium where you can meet in the middle.
Thanks for that, Carla. All right. So looking at leadership, mentorship, and team communication, this is definitely an area that I think is very important and critical for young engineers in relation to mentorship. And recently, with regards to leadership, I myself would have come to I don't want to say realization, but the acceptance that leadership is not about title at all. You can definitely lead no matter what role you are in. Once again, it goes back to, the ability to influence as well. So leadership before the title, which is essentially what that sums up to be, and mentorship for young professionals, even seasoned professionals. I think mentorship is critical. And I just want to add to that as well. Sponsorship is also something that person should look at or pay attention to in organizations, because with regards to the workplace dynamics, having a sponsor, there's a TEDx talk by, I do not remember the lady's name, but she speaks about having a sponsor within your organization where you are being represented in rooms that you've never ever stepped into. And I think that is critical for persons developing and growing in their career in addition to mentorship. And there's a big distinct difference between the two. So Carla, when did you first begin to see yourself as a leader?
So that's a funny question, and perhaps there's some days where I may not, ah, as much as I have to wake up and 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 it seems B1, and my mug actually that I drink my tea from every morning at work, it says leader. It has a line from scripture on it. It has the definition of leader, and that is so that I can soak it in and just remind myself, because I have come from the place of leading without formal authority. And that was what you were speaking of earlier. So much of my early career has been leading from behind. So I didn't have the title. I'm not supervisor. I'm not manager. I'm not CEO. I'm usually just engineer. But what does that mean? You have to lead people. You have to lead technicians. You have to lead contractors. You have to um, present ideas to leadership. You have to sell business cases to leadership as well. And how to build those relationships across those various stakeholder groups, how to communicate effectively. All of those are elements that have gone into my little toolkit and added up to me being able to be seen as a leader, to be seen as a person even before there was the formal authority, to because there are different categories of leadership. And again, we're casting our minds back to organizational behavior, Janelle, where there are those different categories of leadership. And I was very much that type of leader that would have had referent power. So therefore, by virtue of, my ability to get things done, persons would be coming to seek me out to say, well, we want to get so and so, or we want to tackle so and so. Can you come on board? And it's all of those elements that started to build my confidence, and my credibility, to be able to be seen as a leader. It is something, as I've said before, that I've not often seen in myself, but others have held that mirror up and said, well, guess what? You are, as much as I may sometimes just, you ask anyone, you ask me who I am, I'm going to say I'm an engineer. I'm not going to say my title. I'm not going to say I am this, I am that. If you ask me at my base, at my core, I am an engineer. So that's really where it is, for me.
Thanks for that, Carla. I just wanted to add in terms of mentorship and the fact that for me personally throughout my career that has had a significant impact on how I've developed over the years. Fortunately for me, I've had mentors throughout from the time I would have been in secondary school, which would have then influenced even this path of, having done civil engineering as my undergraduate and progressing through. It is something that I try to work on or identify at each stage as I progress through. I would look for someone who I believe has a wealth of knowledge, not only in the subject matter that I am or the field that I'm working within, but someone who aspire to are, you know, they're in a role where I tend to look up to get feedback on, as I said, not only the technical side of the job, but also how to navigate the world of work, essentially. Because I find as you progress and as you get further along in the career, it's less about the technical side and it's more about navigating organizations, navigating the workplace dynamic, working with people, dealing with people, managing persons at various levels, managing persons across various departments, working with persons across various departments. And sometimes that could be a bit difficult to understand, especially when you've gone into a new organization or a different environment. Having someone to help guide you or coach you through that process is critical, and it's something that I think that young professionals should definitely look to identify as they move through their career.
Thanks, Janelle. So just before we move off of this topic about mentorship, is there any one particular experience, perhaps though, that you can share from your mentorship experience? Any lessons from a mentor that have stayed with you?
I would say for one, which was interesting because there was a case where I was having a discussion with someone where it was a little frustrated, for lack of a better word, with the direction of my direct line manager. And, you know, the person said to me, you can still develop, you can still grow in your role, even though you may not necessarily see your direct line manager as someone that you could count on for that guidance and that professional development, by identifying somebody else who might be parallel within the organization or even outside of the organization. And you could still develop and grow from there. So any person said that to me because, you know, going in as a young professional navigating the world of work, you tend to assume or you tend to look at your direct line manager as that person to provide that guidance. That, okay, for the next phase of your career or for the next step of your development, this is what you should look to do. This is what, you know, how you should look to grow, or this is the direction you could consider and that kind of stuff. So when you don't get that from the place where you're expecting it, it could be a bit daunting. But when they said when the person, the mentor at the time told me, you know, don't look at it that way, it could be somebody else, maybe the leader of another department or somebody outside of your organization altogether, or somebody who's not even in your field, your direct field, that can give you that guidance. That's definitely, I would say, a lesson that stuck with me throughout and has helped me navigate various situations and scenarios.
Thanks, Janelle. Okay, so I think we can move on now into confidence.
So in
Mhm.
sorry,
Go
go
on.
ahead. So in terms of confidence while remaining a student, growing confidence while remaining a student, what would you say has helped you develop confidence in environments where you were one of the least experienced people in the room?
Small wins. So not chasing the big wins. I am not, you know, if we will use a cricket analogy, if we're playing, you know, cricket. I am not looking to hit big sixes, but I know that if I can just poke the ball, 1 run, 2 run, maybe the occasional boundary, and start to get numbers on the scoreboard, that I can keep moving forward. So that is my mindset, to keep moving forward. Small steps. I am not looking, to climb stairs and take one giant leap and fall flat on my face. One step, 1 foot in front of the other, and just keep going forward and celebrating each and every small win. And that would help to build my confidence. It helps to display, to persons that yes, we are making progress, we're moving forward, that this is someone who is looking to deliver for us, and that will help to kind of smooth out the journey.
Okay, nice. Thanks for that, Carla. For me, one thing that I find builds confidence or adds to it is building competence. Personally, that is something that has helped me navigate the technical field. Um, Unfortunately, as a female as well in technical field, it is something that we have to have more of, or maybe that's how we view ourselves, but it
No,
is a
Janelle,
case
we
where
have to have more of. So
it is a case where we have to be twice as experienced, twice as knowledgeable, and twice as competent um in comparison to our male counterparts in order to navigate this technical world. But definitely it is something that I personally have relied on in order to build confidence and to empower myself with relation to, stepping into those rooms and having those conversations and being able to represent. Just
thanks.
mindful of the time,
Yes.
and we're wrapping up now.
We are. So we're coming on to the latest buzzwords, which is AI. So I think, can be really good for communication, but we have to definitely keep our, our human judgment firmly at the center of using AI for communication. So way starting at the start of this conversation, Janelle would have, spoken about how engineers are perceived to not be, very good at communication and behind the scenes, or sometimes we're overly technical. And this is where the AI tools, whichever model you want to use, that can help you translate that very technical language now. You can write the prompt to give it context to say, well, rewrite this to the level of a finance professional, so that it can highlight those bullet points, or give me the 3 biggest wins to highlight to the executive team. AI can really do that heavy lifting for you. And definitely it can assist in crafting. So when you're setting up, say, for your difficult conversation, you can use that to craft that message. Um, you can get your draft, you can then start to refine it from there. So again, for every output that AI gives you, it is still very, very valuable to still refine it with your own knowledge, with your own experience. Because as we are learning, the AIs now, they hallucinate. So they may insert things, theories, or concepts that may not be appropriate. Or again, they may not have the full context, say, for our environment if you haven't provided that in a prompt. So the quality of your prompt is also very, very important. And the more context that you can give the AI, the better. So instead of just asking it to list best practices in a particular theory, you will say, well, for a small island developing state or for an organization of 300 employees in financial services or X, Y, and Z, so that the AI can get that context in which you are speaking. If not, it will more than likely give you an output that's tailored for the larger, more global world, which we know in Barbados, is not necessarily always that easy, cookie cutter best fit. And then finally, for meeting summaries and action items, use AI to extract what was said. And I think for me, this is one of the biggest time savers, because, and particularly now as I have grown in my career, the meetings are getting longer. Um, the note-taking ability, writing by hand, the wrist is getting tired. The typing sometimes may distract from what's being said in the room. So we have this ability with artificial intelligence for the AI to generate that summary, but we still have to apply our human judgment to reread the meeting summary to ensure that, the names or the acronyms or the references are captured correctly, and not just, immediately send out notes that when you actually start to dig into them, you'll find that they may not actually be making a lot of sense. So definitely AI is a fantastic tool that you should be integrating where possible. Just obviously be guided by your organization's policies. Or if you are going to be using it, sanitize what you're using as much as possible. So you may not need to maybe include the name of your organization in the prompt that you're giving, but give the AI the context of the organization that you work for to be able to assist with, quickly pulling ideas and communications together. Anything from you, Janelle, on artificial intelligence? Is it a tool that you have interacted with as yet?
Oh, definitely. As you mentioned, I use it to do the heavy lifting. It definitely saves a lot of time, and that is key, especially as you mature and you grow and you have additional responsibilities. Getting things done a bit quicker helps, and where you could spend more time solving the problem than putting the information together to get the problem solved. So it helps collate that information and analyze it in order to then allow you to make a decision. So definitely helps. And as you would have mentioned, it is critical to spend time formulating the prompt in order to get the most value out of it. So essentially with any system, any piece of software, garbage in is garbage out.
That's right.
All right, so wrapping up, what lessons, Carla, you would say, or what key lesson you wish you had learned earlier in your career? And if there's any advice that you would give for women entering engineering.
Okay, so those are two themes. Lessons I wish I'd learned earlier. Perhaps how to tell stories with my data. So again, very data-based, very analysis-based, very rooted in what is fact. But sometimes it's not enough to just have the numbers, to not just have the percentages, to not just have the values or the temperatures. You have to be able to create a story and a message around that to be able to drive the outcome that you need. So definitely for me, trying to learn that ability to tell stories with my data more so than just presenting the basic graphs, charts, tables and hoping that everybody in the room or who's experienced the presentation gets the message or the key takeaway. That's something I wish I'd learned earlier, but I definitely valued when I had the opportunity then, to do some classes that involve things like business analytics to understand and storytelling with data to understand how better to communicate to audiences, particularly with presentations as well, because even something straight down to the color schemes that you use can elicit emotions from your audience. And those are the type of things that were not initially in my head as a young engineer. You just want to get the information down, get it out there. Oh, look, I have these numbers. My numbers are correct. I've done the math. Here it is. And then everyone is looking at you like, and then what? On the second point, advice for young women engineers, I'd say don't underestimate your value, your perspective, don't underestimate your ideas and the contribution that you can make in the room. I would definitely say focus on developing that competence for two reasons. One, I don't want to say it is unquestionable, but it does make it easier for you to respond if you are questioned, that you can reply with confidence that you have achieved a certain level of competence and demonstrated competence that can be backed up. Sometimes we need to go as far as a certification or two or three. I mean, I've collected enough letters after my name as a result. But overall, that does help to build your confidence and establish your credibility. And certainly don't allow stereotypes or your own self-doubts to limit your ambitions. It can be challenging, and there are times where, you've been in a room or somebody had, someone has looked at me and asked me if I was the engineering manager's secretary, and well, I'm like, no, I'm the engineer. And you have to be able to stand your ground in the face of pressures. You will be surrounded sometimes very often by persons who are going to be bigger, taller, louder, stronger than you, but that confidence to be able to stand your ground to get your point across if you believe that you have a contribution to make, that you should make that contribution and add that value to the organization.
Thanks so much for that, Carla. And there really isn't anything more I would add to that advice that you've given for young women entering engineering. So just to wrap up, just want to summarize the entire discussion by saying engineering is not only about solving technical problems, it's about asking questions, building relationships, earning trust, influencing decisions, and communicating ideas effectively. Technical knowledge may start your career, but effective communication helps sustain and accelerate it. Engineering is technical, but impact is human. So thank you once again to BAP for inviting us to speak to you guys on this subject matter. Feel free to connect with both Carla and myself via LinkedIn. Just type in our names and you should find us there easily. And once again, thank you everyone for spending some time online with us tonight. And I hope that you found the information or the discussion useful and the information valuable.
Thank you, Janelle. And we'll turn back over now to Ria to see if we have any more questions from the panel.
Okay, thank you so much again. We're not going to be able to entertain any more questions simply because of the time. However, we did have the contact information at the beginning. So if it's the case where you came in a little bit late and you did want to reach out to either the BAPE them directly or to Janelle or Carla, as you can see, their contact information is on the screen. So you can always feel free to reach out to us after the webinar. I want to truly, truly thank both Janelle and Carla tonight. It was really, really informative. And me personally, I have a lot to work with. And those persons who were in attendance, whether it be via Zoom or on YouTube, I am certain that they also gain a lot of information tonight. I have all of my notes and I'm ready and raring to review all of this and really apply this directly to every area that I can within my own engineering journey. And I think for me, just to finalize, as I send out the poll, which only has about 5 questions, it's not very long. If you could just fill that out for me so we have an idea of how the reach is for the webinar. I think for me, um, what has really gone home is people. People, people, people. Every time you speak to people, the biggest thing about work is never the work. It's always the people. And as we can see, even as engineers, even though we are mostly catering to numbers and catering to concepts and catering to a lot of technical areas, we have to definitely build our people skills, build how we communicate, build how we extract information from people, as well as how we give information to people. I'm going to definitely share the resources that we gained tonight, and I'm definitely going to be looking up organizational behavior. I've heard that quite a bit tonight, and I don't think I've heard about that concept before, but I will definitely be looking up. So again, I want to thank every single one of you for attending here tonight. And I really hope that as your week continues, you remember that disrupt the ego, come humble, and remember that we're focusing on communicating for both parties to understand. Thank you so much again, Carla and Janelle, and I wish everyone a fantastic night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, all.
Good
And
night. You're
thanks
welcome. Thank you for joining.
thank you very much.
Yeah, good night, everyone.